Great, and we'll begin with an announcement in Spanish.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Gracias por estar con nosotros en la reunión del Ayuntamiento del Quinto Distrito de Sonoma. Si desean escuchar la interpretación del idioma español, por favor denle clic al icono de globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccionen el idioma de su preferencia. Gracias.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who is joining us for this evening's Telecom Town Hall. And to give you a bit of a sense of how this came about, we've been hearing a lot of concerns from rural residents in particular about cell phone connectivity and questions on why it feels like it has changed. And so we thought that it would be a great opportunity to bring together providers so that you can actually ask your questions directly of those service providers. So I am joined tonight by some representatives from large telecommunications companies that serve Western Sonoma County, as well as a couple of local heroes who are doing their absolute best to ensure that we have backup communication systems, particularly during disasters. So tonight we are joined by Brian Bottari from Comcast, Donna Davis from AT&T, Marc Colombo and Ray Robertson from T-Mobile. And then we've got Damian Bouné, who is one of our local communications and resiliency experts, particularly in GMRS radios, as well as Brian Hughes of Equitable Access California and the famous founder of Free Wi-Fi in Guerneville. So I would like to highlight that the folks here, I am extremely grateful for their participation. We did have one large telecom company that many folks are customers of, Verizon, who did not respond to our requests to participate. And so unfortunately, Verizon is not represented here. We are planning on working with our local municipal advisory councils to send a formal letter requesting their participation and kind of asking why they didn't come and participate in the future. So again, thanks to those who are here. We are going to be starting with a couple of questions for our telecom panelists, and then we will have 10 minutes of question and answer from the audience. And we'll have kind of a few different 10-minute blocks so that you have an opportunity to ask your questions of the providers. We're going to ask that you utilize the Q&A function so that I can sort of collate those questions. If people are asking the same questions over and over again, those will float to the top. You also actually have an ability to upvote questions so that they are more likely to be selected. And we'll get through as many questions as we possibly can in the next hour and a half. But our introductory question is a broad one. And this goes to our telecom representatives. What are you doing to improve connectivity and service issues in rural areas, particularly in Western Sonoma County, which is what we are talking about? And I'll just popcorn around. I realize we didn't plan out ahead who is going to go first, but Brian, would you mind taking that, followed by Donna and then Ray?
Sounds good. Thank you, Supervisor Hopkins. Thank you to you and your team for having us. This is a really timely forum, as there's a ton going on in broadband generally. I'm mostly going to talk about broadband. That's our bread and butter at Xfinity, and I'll tell you why I'll mostly talk about broadband and rural broadband. I do have a couple of slides. I won't be too out of control with it, I promise. Can you see my screen? All right. So just really quick, want to talk about where we are in West County. Here we go. So we serve all our portions of Bodega Bay, Kaz, Duncan's Mills, Forestville, Guerneville, Monterey, Occidental, and Sebastopol. And so our products, we have the Xfinity X5 is our broadband service. X1 is your kind of traditional cable. And then through this gateway, the modem, we also offer home security and then voice over IP, which is just a voice service over the internet. X Mobile is our mobile offering that we offer for our X5 customers. That is a wholesale broadband or wireless network. So we don't own our cell towers. We piggyback on another provider's network for X Mobile and offer that as a value add for our broadband customers. So our wired broadband service, the network's pretty much the same everywhere we serve. So if you're an Xfinity customer in Cazadero, you get the same level of service as one in downtown Santa Rosa. So we're continuously investing in our network. So we invested over $4 billion last year alone to our over 60 million customers in West County nationwide. And so when we talk about improving connectivity and service in West Sonoma County specifically, there's two major things I'd want to talk about. First is resiliency. And obviously, a resilient network is extremely important in high fire threat areas. And so our network requires commercial power to operate. And so in the age of PSPS and extended power outages, it has resulted in outages for our network also. So those of you, especially who have generators and power walls, and that number of folks is increasing every year, you've probably noticed that during a PSPS, when you've got your generator on, your Comcast is down. So that's because our side of the network does require PG&E power. So we've embarked in a multi-year effort to provide 72 hours of backup power in those tier 2 and tier 3 fire areas. So we're doing that a couple of ways. First, we are installing 72 hours of battery backup to the parts of our network that need power in those areas. And big shout out to Tennis Wake and Permit Sonoma. We've got 133 sites we've needed to build. He has dedicated an engineer to work overtime for us to get those permits turned around so we can get that very important work done. So thank you to Permit Sonoma. We have 133 of those to do. We've done 66 so far. You might have seen them in your neighborhoods. This is what it looks like. The one on the left is an older battery backup, 4 to 6 hours more traditional on the pole. Because of the number of batteries required to get to 72 hours, we've taken that down off the pole and put in those larger cabinets that you see on the right. And then for those that we haven't done with batteries yet, we've got these backup generators that we're rolling out into the communities. We did this last year, so you might have seen them during PSPS. They've got cones around them. There's a phone number on there if you have any questions or concerns. These, if you see them around, they're powering our network during a emergency or PSPS situation. The other big investment we're making is what we call the Roach 10G. So we're testing technology to get multi-gig download and upload speeds over our existing network. So without digging up yards or rewiring homes. And so we are rolling this out by the end of 2025. All of our customers will have this ability over our network to receive multi-gig up and downstream. So I'll stop there. I look forward to your questions. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you very much, Brian. Donna?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Supervisor Hopkins. Really happy to be here and super excited to talk about the work that we've been doing in Sonoma County and even more specifically in West County as we continue to make some very significant investments throughout the county. I think 2019 to 2021, AT&T's invested $90 million in throughout Sonoma County. So included in that is 47 upgrades, including new cell sites, additional wireless and wired network capacity, and new broadband network connections throughout the county. In addition, our upgrades and the new sites that we build also are building out the critical FirstNet public safety network. So when we talk about bringing those first responders to the many kind of disasters that we experienced, especially West County, between the flooding of the river and the fires, we're building out that really critical dedicated public safety network for our first responders. And then I'm really happy to report that specifically in West County, since 2021, we've got 5 new wireless sites on air. So you may be already experiencing some of that improvement. They are providing service in the areas of Bodega Bay, Sebastopol, Guerneville, Duncan's Mills, and also Salt Point up on the coast. So I'm super excited. They took a lot of work, some of those maybe over 5 years to get done, but I'm really glad to say that those are on air since just last year. In addition to the wireless improvements that we've got, we know that achieving digital equity, kind of requires a comprehensive view of all the barriers that would hinder individuals' ability to get connected. So including access to the internet, as well as both the devices and digital literacy. So AT&T is really committed to continue work with the state, local, and tribal governments to boost that access to affordable and reliable internet. So we're engaged right now in multiple conversations across the state and in and around Sonoma County about how we can help local governments make best use of the state and federal broadband funding that's available now. We continue to explore those opportunities to help us bring more AT&T fiber to businesses and homes throughout Sonoma County. We've got challenges out there, especially in West County. Population's very dispersed, got rugged terrain, internet connections are poor if they exist at all. And so in those cases where the networks haven't quite reached those most difficult to serve areas, I think we're looking to really look to establish those public-private partnerships to build out those broadband facilities, including partnerships with local municipalities. So, you know, as builders of that internet network, we're ready to collaborate with Sonoma County and help make that reality on the ground for that broadband. And the last thing I want to talk about, you know, we talk about improving connectivity. There's connectivity there, and then I think sometimes we miss that adoption piece. So in those areas where connectivity is available, you know, we continue to work to get the word out regarding our Access from AT&T program. That's our low-income offer, and in conjunction with the federal benefits program, the Affordable Connectivity Program, eligible customers, they take advantage of those two together, you know, can qualify for internet service at zero cost to those qualified customers. So we've been working with over 325 community-based organizations and government organizations throughout California to kind of help spread the word. You know, we do a lot of advertising, digital marketing, but sometimes it really comes down to that grassroots efforts, working with the local trusted community partners to help get that word out. So I wanted to let you know too, Supervisor Hopkins, that, you know, I've got that information and we're happy to share it, you know, in multiple languages to try to get that word out so that we can increase the adoption. So that's it for me. I think I'm done with my time.
Thank you so much, Donna. I appreciate it. Ray, do you want to jump in for T-Mobile?
Absolutely. Or Marc, do you want to maybe start?
Marc, you're on mute. I'm sorry I didn't call you because you were dark on the screen. It was black.
Sorry about that.
There, no worries. Good to see you.
Was stuck in traffic and then quickly got home. So
thanks for being here.
Again, just similar, I think, to Comcast and AT&T, we continue to keep making significant investments into the hardening of the system to make sure that we're delivering a good service for our customers. We want to make sure that, you know, I think we take the importance of natural disasters and wildfires very seriously in the sense of just knowing how much our connectivity is relied upon. So we're continuing to keep doing hardening efforts where we're actually installing generators at our cell site locations. Similar to what Comcast has done too, we've made a significant investment in portable generators to be able to deploy those at the verge of any type of natural disaster and to make sure that we're keeping the continuity up for at least 72 hours at a bare minimum, but hopefully even longer as long as we can get access to those locations and sites. So, you know, we're very focused on that. We're also trying to upgrade a lot of our backhaul to 10 gigs just to make sure that we also have the capacity and the bandwidth to make sure we're able to support a lot of the traffic that is going across both from a cell phone perspective as well as also from a home internet perspective. Ray, I don't know if you want to add some specifics around the technical side.
Yes, absolutely. So we do cover quite a large portion of the Sonoma County. To what Marc was also saying, beyond also just the hardening, where we are hardening the network from a power resiliency perspective, we're also doing a significant network upgrade. We are upgrading a lot of the network to support the latest technology with the latest bandwidth, which is enabling a lot of our high-speed internet. And that's also then enabling a lot of our fixed wireless solutions, which we're providing internet, broadband coverage, broadband solutions for various customers out in the Sonoma area. That upgrade is continuing today, and there's a lot of upgrades that we've got planned within various cities throughout Sonoma in the next year or two.
Thank you so much for that update. And also thank you, Brian, for starting to answer some of the Q&A questions in writing. And so we just wanted to mention to our panelists that it would be great if you see a Q&A question that you're able to respond to in writing to keep that conversation happening, you know, via the Q&A function. And then I will also be asking questions verbally as well. So one great question from Carolyn is that cell phone providers are supposed to have 72-hour backup power. Who monitors this to be sure it's happening? And has your company implemented this service? So maybe we can go in reverse order this time. Ray or Marc, do you have an answer? Absolutely,
yes. As Marc mentioned, the critical component for us is to making sure that we have service, and that's in all situations, whether it's business as usual, whether it's PSPS or whether it's a disaster. So we have multiple situations where we've deployed battery solutions. I believe some other individuals talked about that before, to sites. We have started deploying permanent generators to sites as part of the hardening. And obviously then we've got a dependency upon fueling. And we also have a fleet of portable generators. And when it's safe to deploy those portable generators, we'll get those portable generators out to site to recover power if needed, particularly in scenarios of PSPS. And we have prior notification of a potential outage due to potential fire risk. We will deploy generators to those sites to make sure that we don't lose coverage.
Thank you so much for that, Donna.
Yes, thank you. And additionally, we have a very active effort to address that 72-hour backup power for our cell sites. As Brian mentioned, we're, I think, on the same boat, dependent on that that commercial power that comes to us. But all of our cell sites do have backup battery. And the ones that don't have backup generator for the additional support, we are working on those where those can be deployed. I will say there will be some instances where we aren't able to for a limit of space or perhaps a landlord or other access issues. And in those cases where we don't yet have them, or maybe we can't put them on there, we do have a fleet as well of deployable backup generators. And during, for example, a PSPS, that's all kind of pre-planned, and those are deployed to specific areas in advance of the PSPS so that we can be ready to put those generators, the portable generators, where they need to be. So yes, we're definitely addressing that.
Great. And, also wanted to add into this question is that I know I've worked with some of you during disasters actually to bring in sort of temporary telecommunications infrastructure. And so if there's anything that you wanted to mention about that in your answer, feel free. I don't know if Donna, if you wanted to mention anything. I know I've worked with Brian as well.
Sure, and you've probably seen it. One of the ones that sticks out in my mind is 2019, when we had that really bad flood from the Russian River there in Guerneville, that we did deploy one of our, what we call a colt. It's a cell on a light truck. So we have colts, we have cows, which are cells on wheels. And actually there's now even additional options for that kind of backup cell service when everything is out, or in the case where maybe there isn't coverage existing there, we can deploy those assets to help support during the emergency and also, for during the recovery period. I remember we left that colt there down by the sheriff's substation for quite some time at that point. So we definitely have that fleet. I mentioned FirstNet a little bit when I talked about it. And so the FirstNet network, that's our dedicated broadband network for public safety, and those users of FirstNet, the subscribers of FirstNet, like fire and police and sheriff, they have their own access to their own dedicated FirstNet deployable assets like that. So when they need that for a fire or wildfire or flood, they can call up and have special deployables sent to support them at incident command or even out in the field where maybe existing cell service isn't there.
Thank you. Brian, you want to jump in?
Sure, I addressed the 72 hours in my slides, but I will mention during disasters and also during COVID, we typically open our Wi-Fi hotspots up to the general public. And we also set up Wi-Fi in all of the evacuation shelters when they're stood up, usually within a few hours of them opening up. So thank you.
Great. One thing that I am seeing both in the Q&A and that I've heard a lot of feedback from the community is particularly in the lower Russian River area of actually seeing a decrease in cell coverage, particularly along River Road. And so I'm curious, what might be causing this? Is there any sort of known problem? And we've also been told by some representatives that sometimes there's actually a compatibility issue between sort of SIM cards and different forms of cell towers. I'm just wondering if you could touch on those and if there's any idea of what is causing a decrease in service for some folks who are seeing more dropped calls and less ability to continue conversations as they traverse these areas. And if anyone just wants to jump into that one who has some thoughts, please go ahead and do.
So I'll just start. I mean, I think you highlighted it. There's a lot of different technologies out there, so it will vary. I think the best case scenario is to always sort of really look at some specific examples. So we would have to take that back. But ultimately, again, I mean, there's lots of things that can cause it. There's a lot of interference out there. We have to look at coverage. Sometimes the sector might go down, specifically the wind. I mean, it could be numerous things that are impacting cell coverage. But it's best for us to always troubleshoot it from that standpoint and have a technician go out there. So I'll make a note to get out to River Road, just to double check it from our standpoint.
Great, thank you. And, in addition to speculating on possible causes, it would also be helpful probably for folks to know how best to contact or make these kinds of complaints so that a technician could come and see if there is, sort of a broader service challenge. So any thoughts on that, Marc, before it looks like Donna's leaning in?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have specific customer service numbers that we need to make sure we're following the proper protocol, because that's where a lot of the ticketing gets tracked. That's how we dispatch our folks out. So we're able to see that. So that would be the ask first and foremost, to go through the actual customer service if you are experiencing specific issues. And then at that point in time, we can start to track and look at the logs specifically. And if they were, I would ask that they reach out if there's a specific escalation process, then we would be able to reach out to you or others within the community and sort of work through that path.
Great, thank you.
It's challenging in that sense because there's lots of people that a drop call could happen at any point in place.
Yeah. Donna, do you have anything on that?
I almost feel like Marc covered it. And I think that is the challenge, really. I know when I go to our engineers, when we have questions or concerns about changes in coverage or perceived changes in coverage, it's super helpful to be able to capture that. And especially if they're coming to your office, Supervisor Hopkins, that we have kind of specifics or dates or the area or the numbers so that we can kind of go back and look and see if maybe there was something that happened. I don't know, interruption of power, something, right, that we can kind of identify. I'm not familiar with anything specific to this area regarding kind of dropped calls or a decrease in that service, but I'm happy to, help you with those if you receive those kind of inquiries from residents.
Thank you so much. Anything to add, Brian?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Great. Well, this is the next question that we asked folks to prepare for in advance, which is what immediate build out is currently in progress and what is on the horizon in the next 1 to 3 years for your company, particularly as it pertains to Sonoma County or Western Sonoma County in particular. And I think that this will dovetail from an excellent question that Mike asked. And so just in particular for AT&T, I wanted to fold in the question about Mike Nichols says, thanks so much for the activation of both Mealy Road and Duncan's Mills cell sites along the lower river. And is there a status update on permitted sites in Monterey, Riverbend, and Camp Meeker, which are desperately needed for service during emergencies? Also noted Cazadero as a tier 3 high fire threat area and still lacks cell service, which is vital for fire services. So kind of in general, anything about build out, and then if there's any knowledge on those, particular local areas, it would be great to fold that in. And Donna, should we start with you then?
And I'm sorry, I heard Camp Meeker and I didn't catch the other ones.
Yeah, and it's also in the questions. So I'm just pulling it up one more time. So Monterey, Riverbend, and Camp Meeker, and then also talking about the needs of Cazadero.
Yeah, so it's a little challenging. I've kind of given you the updates that I can at the point where we are in the process. So a lot of that information is not currently available to share publicly, but definitely willing to take it back. And if there's something that I can share publicly with respect to any of those, I'm happy to do that. So I've taken a note here and I'll follow back up.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Brian or Ray or Marc, anyone want to jump in with any more additional information about planned expansion?
I went first last time. Go ahead, Marc.
Well, I was manically here in the background trying to look at our plans. Generally, I would say that, as I said earlier, there is a constant network upgrade ongoing. We are always looking at sites where people are located, where to do the best build, but equally as well, enabling all of our sites with the latest and newest technology so everyone can gain the benefit of that. And Marc talked about this as well, with the backhaul upgrade, going to the 10 gig gigabits backhaul that Brian was even talking about earlier as well. So there is a constant upgrade happening. Certainly in the information that I've looked at, there are plans in a lot of the areas here within Sonoma to do major upgrades to support the latest technologies and latest bands. So there is a constant upgrade plan here within this area. I'm just seeing if I can get some details on the cities mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Ray. And we could probably go to Brian maybe while you look through that information and see if there's anything to share. Does that work to give you a couple minutes to think?
So I'd say help is on the way, West County. It is an extremely exciting time in rural broadband, an unprecedented time. There's over $60 billion of state and federal money that has been allocated for rural broadband between the infrastructure bill and ARPA and all various buckets. So the process is underway to get this money out. And there's a couple things I think we need to do to make sure that we get our share. First, the first piece of getting this money out is mapping, good mapping. The maps right now, broadband maps, are not granular enough. So the FCC and the CPUC are undertaking mapping efforts. They're working with all of the broadband providers to get parcel level data to determine really who is served and who is unserved. And so to determine where these grants can go. We can help as a locality, as a county, by making sure that our maps are accurate, and there are input processes at the federal and state level to make sure that they are. So that's job one. And then job two is these agencies are going to write the rules for getting this money out. We don't know what the rules are yet. Indications are that preference is going to be given to public-private partnerships. So there are some counties surrounding us that have looked at all of their unserved areas. They have talked to providers. They have broken their unserved areas into manageable projects, and they pledged support for any provider who wants to apply for the grants to serve those areas. They don't care who it is, they don't care what it is. They just say, serve this area, you'll get a support letter from us. In Solano County, they're even providing a small local match from their ARPA funds for the successful bidder for the projects to make it pencil a little better. So we're hoping to partner with Sonoma County as well to make sure that our fair share of that money comes here, no matter who the provider is or what it is, to make sure that these areas get served. So that's very important. And all of that is underway right now. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of rural broadband, and I'm not sliding you to death, but I do want to bring this map up. This is the California State Middle Mile Fiber Network. So this is a $3 billion investment by the governor out of the state's ARPA funding. And so what this is basically a fiber superhighway that the state will build. It will be open access, so any provider can utilize this network to then build the last mile to your home. Mobile providers can use this for backhaul for new towers. So they just had the groundbreaking for the first piece of this. I think it's like thousands of miles, but the first piece of it, the groundbreaking was today in San Diego County. And they've announced the first kind of tranche of projects they're doing in this network. None in Sonoma County yet. There are some in Lake and Mendocino, but they're definitely going to take local input on, and they have been taking local input on the parts of this network they should build first. I know Sonoma and Marin counties and all the way up the coast want this Highway 1 piece. So we're hopeful that's going to start fairly soon. And once that happens, it's going to lower the barrier of entry for any internet provider who wants to build that last mile. If you can get the freeway piece to you, it makes it a lot less costly to build the rest of it. So that's the idea behind this. So we're all very excited about that possibility as well.
Thank you so much for that. I had one question about sort of landlines, and that given the challenges with respect to cell service in Western Sonoma County, are you still offering new landline service? Because the constituent here is saying that AT&T isn't. So any commentary on landline accessibility in Western Sonoma County?
Sorry, oh, that was me, right? Yeah, no, they should be able to order a new landline. So if we can capture that information, then I'm happy to do some follow-up on that. And then I just kind of wanted to circle back and talk about some future builds. In addition to everything that's going on with broadband and all the stimulus money that's come and being available for the county, I just wanted to talk again a little bit about wireless coverage. I know it's a really hot topic on this call, especially in West Sonoma County. You know, we still do have several projects that are in various stages of going through the process of maybe one day being born as a cell site. What I'll say is that, you know, while we often face some limited opposition to new wireless sites, you know, we also recognize that so many of you want the expanded coverage. So I just want to make a note here, my little public service announcement, that it's important to note that this permitting process is one that allows for public comment. And I would urge the residents that, you know, want to see that improvement and that expansion of coverage to speak up via email or calls or participate in those planning commission hearings, because if you don't speak up, then it's perhaps a decision might be made based on a small handful of people that have some issue with the site. So I just want to make that plug and make sure that everyone knows that we're working to build it out there. And if you want it, you know, we'd love to see you at these hearings.
I think that is a really important point. And, you know, I do want to note that we have undertaken years of community advocacy in some cases to support cell towers, and that, you know, our municipal advisory council members, as well as our public safety agencies, you know, fire districts along the coast have really been key critical supporters to show that there is actually public demand for and public support for enhanced telecommunication services. So thank you very much for that. And I'm also glad to hear that there is no anti-landline policy. So that is still something that can go forward. I've got another question, but I did want to circle back to Ray in case you had any additional information that you wanted to share on some of the communities that were mentioned earlier in reviewing your information.
Yes, absolutely. So I did have a quick check. We do have some PORs or plan of records going on with some of the sites, particularly around about Monte Rio. So there are upgrades that are ongoing, as well as the hardening. I do have a planned records for hardening in that area too. One thing to go back to the coverage point as well. A lot of these sites we're also deploying on low band spectrum. That low band spectrum, 600 megahertz, is something that propagates much further and can help with coverage related issues. And this site, particularly Monte Rio, does have the low band spectrum. So it would really depend upon people's cell phones, what sort of phones they're using. If they have the latest handsets, then a lot of this new technology, a lot of these new bands would be supported, and that will help the customer too.
Great. I have a question from Lisa. As someone who used to work in the telecom space, what are the providers doing to design and implement DAS networks to reach communities not serviced by existing towers and fake tree towers? How can faster deployments of DAS or alternatives to towers be aided or slowed by local communities, which I think gets to Donna's point of, you know, how can we potentially support the implementation of solutions in order to expand coverage? And so for the uninitiated, I believe that DAS stands for Distributed Antenna System. And I'm sure that all of you know more about it than I do. So if anyone wants to jump in and provide a little bit of an overview before answering the question, please go ahead. Awkward Zoom silence.
Well, certainly when we look at any site design, we always look for the best solution. And here in T-Mobile, we do use DAS solutions, or you're right, distributed antenna solutions. Typically, they're used with a centralized hub location. Then you'll have optical fiber running out to an antenna, which could be 12 kilometers away. That is a solution that we've used in multiple scenarios. Obviously, it will depend upon planning permission, how we can access running the cables to those remote antennas. So there's a lot of design permitting issues associated to that, but it is a solution that's used when needed.
I was keeping muted for dogs barking in the background here today. I'm not familiar that we're actually deploying DAS as a solution out here in West Sonoma County. I know we do use DAS. Typically, those applications would be around a sports arena, build business complexes, that kind of scenario. So I'd have to take that question back as well.
Great. Brian, anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thanks.
Great. Well, I think that actually is a good segue into continuing with our agenda and hearing from some of our local folks who are working on solutions. And then after they give their presentation, then we can kind of circle back to questions for all of the panelists, if that works for everyone. So I would like to go ahead and introduce again formally Damian, who is going to provide us an overview on the work that he is doing on disaster preparedness and communications.
All right. My microphone's still working? Yes, okay, all right, thank you. So as Linda mentioned, I'm Damian Bouné. I'm a resident of West County out in what we refer to as the Coastal Hills. I've been working with a large group over the last, almost 3 years now, to help provide tools to citizens to facilitate communications and when other methods fail or just in situations where it's beneficial. A big part of that has been our work with GMRS. GMRS is a FCC mandated radio service that is available to all citizens. It is a licensed service and requires a $35 fee per household for 10 years. It goes hand in hand with another service called FRS, Family Radio Service, and I'll talk about the differences momentarily. Both services are relatively short range. FRS is a little bit more short range than GMRS, but they can come in handy when during an evacuation in your neighborhood or during a larger disaster scenario, such as a flood or an earthquake. This is, sorry, it's been a long day. So again, GMRS requires a fee. FRS is free to use. GMRS has an additional potential that FRS does not, to utilize repeaters. So that's been a big part of our project focus, is building out a repeater system within Sonoma County that allows us to communicate much longer distances. So for example, if you're in Guerneville, you might be able to communicate with Santa Rosa in a disaster scenario. Our focus is primarily on hyperlocal neighborhood assistance. That's neighbors helping neighbors during an evacuation or a disaster scenario. But the repeaters are there to provide us that wider range coverage and potentially connect us in with others who can help additionally, such as ham operators and potentially public officials as well. The repeater network that we've put together currently covers the Coastal Hills, the Lower Russian River, North County, Santa Rosa, Occidental, and with more to come. The repeaters are powered independently or are capable of being powered independently, and we're putting in redundancy as well so that we can provide that service to everybody under as many potential circumstances as possible. It's really about what happens when we need to be able to communicate as a group and what happens when we don't have other forms of communication. And I think it's really important to highlight that GMRS, FRS, and other radio services such as ham, which I'll mention in a moment too, are not intended to replace traditional services like 911. They're an enhancement to it, a backup for when something else fails. There is utility to it in an evacuation scenario. However, to communicate with a group. So I want to highlight that too, that This is potentially useful in scenarios where you want to be able to communicate with your whole neighborhood or with your local region, where cell phones and internet are very useful for dialing 911 or getting other information. Radios can be useful for helping coordinate communities. So that's been another big piece of our work, is to go out into communities and help them understand what radio can do for them in these situations, help provide them with the knowledge and the tools to utilize those radios, and the additional services such as the repeaters that will make those more widely functional to everybody. So on that, I have to give a big shout out to the County of Sonoma Transportation and Public Works, the Monterey Fire Foundation, Occidental Fire, North County Fire, and a lot of others who are participating with us in this process and helping prepare our communities for disaster. Anybody who's interested more in GMRS or would like to talk about getting their neighborhood involved can email me and I'll put that email address into the chat. Additionally, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that are going on that may be of interest to some members of the public. Ham radio is an additional service that provides a wider range of communication. You can talk further, you can do a lot more. However, it is a licensed service, requires a test and more significant knowledge for those who are not familiar already. Sorry, get my notes here. There is a group that is part of the County of Sonoma called County of Sonoma Auxiliary Radio Communications Service. If you are a ham operator or if you are interested in becoming a ham operator, I would encourage you to look them up. They provide additional communication services during emergencies to the county and to others, and they could use more members. Additionally, through some of my other associations with Fort Ross Fire and North County, there's a group called North Bay Area Mesh in BAM, and they are putting together a internet-style mesh network that would be of interest to ham radio operators. Its intention is to provide internet-style connectivity for communities, primarily for those who are helping to assist in emergency communications, utilizing similar technology to Wi-Fi. So for those who are ham radio operators, I would encourage you to look more into that. And then finally, I would just like to ask everybody to install Watch Duty on their phones. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm involved in that project. I'm a co-founder and a reporter for Watch Duty. And so I would encourage everyone to look into that. And then very importantly as well, if you've been to any of the events out there, you'll find folks providing National Weather Radio emergency alert radios. These are a great way for folks to get emergency alerts when internet services, cell phones, etc. are down. And I highly recommend everyone have one of those in their home. And please sign up for Nixle and SoCo Alert. These are important systems that our county and sheriff provide to get information out. And we need as many of them as we can get. So please do it all. Get the NWR radio, sign up for Nixle, sign up for SoCo Alert, get Watch Duty on your phone, and get involved in forms of communication that are not affected by whether there's a PSPS or whether there's internet service available. And that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Damian. And I have to say, I noticed that Josh Leone was in the audience as well. And one of the best things about my job is getting to work with folks like Damian Bouné and Josh Leone and Brian Hughes, who are bringing so much passion, and not just passion, but efficacy to problem solving, to troubleshooting some of the biggest challenges of our times, which is how do we live in a very rural community with fragmented communication systems and an increasingly severe threat of wildfire. And so they have been absolutely critical to solving those problems. I also want to say thank you again. I, like many of the folks in the audience, have found myself sometimes very frustrated on one end of the phone, stuck in a telephone tree with a telecom company. But the folks on this screen are really folks who are focused on problem solving, community problems, and also communicating. And so I am grateful for the folks who are participating today and for the relationship that we have with, between our office and you, that you come and are really trying to help address community concerns in real time. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Brian Hughes, the fantastic instigator of a wonderful program to launch free wireless in our small town downtowns.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to go ahead and I have a small presentation as well. So let's see if I can blow this through in 5 minutes. So let me go ahead. So I just kind of want to give an update real quick on what we've done. So if everybody's wondering who is EQAC, it's actually a new organization that was born out of the Russian River Alliance. So the Russian River Alliance, back in February, Supervisor Hopkins' office, we applied for a TIF grant and received it, and with the goal of doing something special for Guerneville. And we, in June, we deployed a free public Wi-Fi, and it's been running ever since. So EQAC is now the kind of a new entity because we want to start duplicating this model throughout District 5 and actually throughout Sonoma County, and honestly throughout all of rural California. So we've demonstrated that this model is highly effective. It's very low cost. Our ROI on Guerneville is coming in at about $8 per resident per year. So it's pretty awesome. So the key thing is disaster preparedness, communications with the outside world. So our network that we're deploying is actually a hybrid. It is a mix of earth-based backhauls, primarily Comcast, and sky-based backhauls, which is Starlink. So Guerneville, we will be expanding the network with this ARPA grant that we just got to include Starlink. And Starlink is actually not a backup. It's going to be solar powered nodes with a battery backup, and it'll actually just work with the network. So it'll load balance across all of the different access points. The beauty about this is that when the internet goes down, when power goes out, Starlink, unless the sky is on fire, Starlink should be providing us with service, which is going to be invaluable to our first responders and anybody who, if we're in a PSP event and we're not evacuated, you can come down to town and you'll be able to grab it, use your phone, make a call, check, see what's going on. So Guerneville, we rolled out 1.5 square miles, 10 access points, 5 gateways. Again, in January, we're going to be expanding with Starlink as soon as the actual satellite dishes arrive. So this is what an access point looks like. This is kind of how discreetly they're mounted throughout town. And what's interesting is that in the first 3 months of our usage, we've had 8,249 unique clients doing about 3 terabytes of data. What's interesting here too is that the majority of people are actually using a VPN, which is good because it is a public network. But next to the VPN is Google services. So so what we're seeing here is that our social media is actually lower down on the list. So there is a slight indication here that the network is actually being used not just for scrolling through your Facebook feed or Instagram feed. So I do want to thank you for Supervisor Hopkins, Elise Whelan, the rest of the D5 staff, and also now the ARPA team, Jake and Oscar. they've been thrown a kind of sideball with us on how to do this. So we got one community down, 6 more to go. So with our ARPA grant, we are going to be going for 6 more. So our challenge has been Jenner. And so we found out recently that Jenner does not have actually a service provider such as Comcast, but we're going to go ahead and move forward with Jenner so that at least there'll be a Starlink uplink. So the Jenner site won't be as robust in terms of bandwidth as, say, for example, Guerneville, which has 5 Comcast backhauls. But we will be providing this so that at least Jenner has the fallback for disaster preparedness, you know, being able to just drive down. So Cazadero, so all of this stuff should be happening in January, since it's all part of the ARPA grant that we got. So Cazadero will have 1 Starlink, 1 Comcast, or sorry, 2 Comcast, 1 Starlink, total of 4 access points. Bodega Bay will have 3 Comcast, 1 Starlink. Bodega will have 1 Comcast, 1 Starlink. And if you notice, one of the key things about how we decide where to put the network is disaster preparedness, and the ability to congregate during a disaster is an important consideration. So for example, here in Bodega, the church is a great place for people to come to congregate in terms of a disaster, in order, you know, so we don't want them to be interfering with first responders if there is a situation. So Jenner, again, we'll be looking to try to get at least a Starlink up and running to service Jenner, and then Forestville. Again, you know, we picked, so Forestville will have each of these sites usually try to include the fire station, so that we can provide and extend the mesh network into the firehouse. So you'll see that here in Cazadero, it starts at the firehouse. Bodega includes the firehouse. Forestville includes the firehouse. And then it looks like we might be able to add Monterey to the mix. So that's kind of an exciting announcement. So yeah, so thank you. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We should be doing the next round of deployment in December, January. What's held us up is the global supply chain issues with getting the Cisco Meraki hardware. And then obviously we're going to be working hard on trying to get more funding, either through USDA, through CASIF, through the CPUC, to start to try to expand this across Sonoma County. So our goals would be to start to look towards Geyserville, Roseland, Glen Ellen, the Springs, as other districts that we can start to expand into. So.
Thank you so much, Brian. And it's just so wonderful to see this project snowball and grow and provide critical services. And I think hopefully economic development opportunities for our small town downtowns. It's fantastic. So. And actually you reminded me that we do have a brief update from Starlink. They were unable to attend this evening's town hall, but our 5th district team actually did meet with Starlink, I believe even maybe earlier today or yesterday. It was very recent, and has some information to share with everyone. So Elise, if you want to provide some of that information from Starlink and then maybe segue us into our next round of questions for all the panelists.
Thanks so much. It really shows that this comment about it takes a village. You know, there is no one perfect solution. It takes all of us working together on all these various perspectives and technologies to develop a good network for us. So we invited Starlink to be part of the panel, but even more, we had been talking with them for the last few years. Our office initially advocated for Sonoma County to be one of the early adopter areas to Starlink satellite service as a connectivity solution to remote areas of West County. Our community members, particularly those along the coast with open skies who have switched to Starlink, have reported back that the service, access, the reliability and speed have been a great improvement for them. As Brian said, Starlink service will be an integrated part of the free Wi-Fi program through EQAC, and this will be a great resilience piece to the puzzle as well. While Starlink is not currently available in all areas, they are building up very, very quickly, and they're anticipating that their services will be widely available in 2023, and then will be a growing piece of the connectivity puzzle for West County. Also, in late 2023, I'm not sure if you brought it up with T-Mobile earlier, a recent partnership agreement with T-Mobile and Starlink will provide T-Mobile cell phone subscribers with satellite-based texting services, providing text coverage in locations previously unserved by mobile phones. The ultimate goal in the 2 to 3 time range is to add voice capabilities to the service. So there's a lot going on. We also learned that some of the connectivity services that Starlink has helped communities respond to disasters implement. They have been bringing together tools that are mobile and that can be used by disaster teams. And we're going to be continuing to work with them to maintain communication during emergency situations through those new provisions that they've been working on. So a lot going on there, and we'll continue to stay in touch with them and grow that service. I'm looking at the questions. Heather Rowe asks, Brian, can Rio Nito be added, please? Lisa Namenson asks, Brian, can you explain in lay terms what you said about VPN versus Google as an access point? We don't understand.
All right, good. I was actually trying to type that, so it's be a lot easier to say it. So a VPN is called a virtual private network, and it's something that is good to have installed on your phone. There are some free apps. You can either go to the apps to iTunes or to the Google Play Store, and you can download it. And what it does is it encrypts your connection when you join a wireless network. And this is really good. I mean, as a general habit. So our network is actually isolated. So we've done a good job at having a level of security so that devices on our network can't see each other. But if you're in a coffee house or if you're anywhere, it's best to not just use the network, but to actually get your VPN, spin it up, and then use the network. It'll protect yours. So when I was saying that people using when people use a VPN, we can't tell where they're going. Like all of their traffic is encrypted. All we know is that they're using this VPN. Google services is a different story. We can tell that a lot of traffic is going to Google services. We can tell that a lot of traffic is going to different applications that are being used. And it's good because it means that they're not necessarily using Facebook or Instagram. I hope that helped.
Thanks so much. One of the questions that I've seen multiple times in various ways, so I'm not sure if it's been adequately covered yet, but people want to know why service has degraded so much over the past year, especially during high tourist weekends. Is it capacity issues, or is it because there's been changing from 3G to 4G? When will service be better? Does anybody have an answer to that, or has that already been covered? That's for any of you.
Certainly, with any service, the more people on that service, the more congestion you'll get. So congestion is definitely a factor as we look at particularly areas that are impacted by high tourism. However, we are in T-Mobile under a large network upgrade program. Part of that is the reutilization of the spectrum that we have as we look to have better coverage with higher throughputs, with better capacity, is as we move from 3G to 4G and 5G. So that's definitely part of our roadmap. And to support this, there is a requirement to have certainly newer handsets. So that is a large component of that. But then also to address the capacity concern, we are upgrading a lot of our backhaul to 10 gigs. And I see there's a lot of comments here about old Casadero Road. I just did a quick look up on the sites that covers that area. That's a site that we recently upgraded to a 10 gig backhaul site. So we are upgrading a network to support that higher capacity demands. And certainly we always try to address any capacity concerns within the network.
Any additions from the others, or move to the next question?
I was going to have a question for Ray. Sorry, this is from panelist to panelist. With 3G, 3G has been sunsetted, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
3G has a lot of limitations towards, one, how it operated. It was an interference-based system. So the capacity was greatly impacted as to how it operated. As you move across to 4G and 5G, there's a lot more capacity that's supported there. Yeah. So yes, in the majority of cases, both CDMA and UMTS have been sunsetted.
Yeah. And so with 3G, though, it had a longer range, though, than 4G, right? 3G was 20 miles. I think 4G is 10.
It's actually the range is associated to the band in itself. And what we've done is we've reutilized the frequency into other technologies. Okay. So UMTS has been sunsetted. We've now deployed LTE and 5G on 600. So the lower the frequency, the longer the range, and obviously the higher capacity, the shorter the range as you go up through the bands. So it's more associated to the bands, and we've been deploying on the low band as well, which would give you that cell range.
Cool, thank you.
Well, as you can see, we do have a really great set of people in our community that have great skills, and we're wondering if there's any way the residents of the Lower Russian River can help the providers to map or to provide points or give feedback and assist with your projects. We've gotten that question several times here. Is there any way we can coordinate or assist with people on the ground to help you?
Absolutely. I think obviously we as providers know where we are, right? So that piece is covered. I think after they do the first round of mapping, there's going to be an input period there. And so that's the place for local governments especially to weigh in, and many are have a lot of activity in broadband. And the Sonoma has had several studies and they're looking at the issue. So I think the more coordinated we can be about where the unserved areas really are, and make sure that we're speaking with a unified voice to the state and the feds to make sure that they're not marking, the risk is marking people as served who aren't, and people as served who are actually underserved. That's the risk here. We want to make sure the maps are very accurate about who doesn't have adequate service, because if the maps say they do, then they're not going to be eligible for the grant funding. So we just have to stay really tight, providers, community, government, to make sure that the maps reflect reality.
Thank you. And on that note, I just wanted to share, we've been kind of focusing on the questions, but share some feedback from various residents. We've gotten, in addition to the communities and towns that we asked in a question earlier, folks from Green Valley, Villa Grande, Rio Neto, Bridgehaven, Jenner, Hacienda, all really would love to have better service. And I think that one of the challenges, of course, is that you have your maps, we don't. And so, it does sort of create this, question mark of when and how much and how fast. And, for us in West County, it's really a matter of life or death, right? These are critical communications tools, particularly in an era of wildfire, not to mention our usual, winter storms and floods. And so it is just so critical, and I appreciate your responsiveness to our community, and hopefully also ferrying some of these wonderful comments and feedback, back to your companies and seeing what you can do to push the needle. Brian touched on this a little bit earlier, but there was a question specifically about, do you plan to access the $6 billion for middle mile broadband allocated by the state of California, in addition to federal funding options? It does feel like we are at an unprecedented moment. I think that those of us who live in West County have been sort of rattling the cages for better broadband, for years. And finally, the federal government and the state government, perhaps in light of everyone working from home and schooling from home during the pandemic, finally woke up and said, hey, this is a problem. And so, there is this exciting opportunity for funding. Any additional commentary on what you're planning, how much you're planning on going after specifically for Sonoma County?
I'll go first. Yeah, as I mentioned, we've stood up a rural broadband team so that we're ready when the rules are set and the maps are made and the application periods are open. I'll definitely reiterate that it seems like the tighter we are with the county and cities who have unserved areas in terms of going to the state with one voice, that these are the areas that are unserved and we want to serve them, the better. So yes, 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 all the above.
And I would ditto to Brian. We are waiting on a lot of those things. The maps, I think those dates keep getting pushed out, right, for the CQC mapping as well as the FCC mapping. But you know, we, like I mentioned before, we've been in contact in and around Sonoma County, and we're standing ready to, you know, work together, partner as soon as we've got a way to identify those areas and where it makes a good partnership, where we're ready to do that with the county.
Yeah, and similar to what Brian and Donna already said, I think it's, we're just constantly evaluating it, waiting for these maps to be updated, and we have a team working behind the scenes that's constantly looking at securing some of these funds.
Great. You know, one thing, and this was actually brought up by a resident, is that, you know, ultimately telecommunications companies are regulated by the CPUC. So there's actually a reminder that, you know, if you ever have an inability to access service as a resident, you know, it is really important to go through the appropriate customer service channels so that a technician could be dispatched, as we discussed before. But also don't forget to ask for a ticket number, because if for some reason the issue never gets resolved and you find yourselves having to go to the CPUC, it would be helpful to have that ticket number. So just a little reminder there from Mike. I am scanning through the other questions. Elise, do you have any that are ready to go? Let's see, we've got a question about SIM cards and SIM card compatibility. Does anyone want to touch on this topic? Is it possible that, for instance, your phone doesn't talk as effectively to a new cell tower that recently was upgraded in your neighborhood?
I believe I covered that answer a bit earlier. With modernization, there are new technologies that are deployed. The SIM card and the phone provides the access and the capability to access those new technologies. So there are situations where, as we deploy new technology, new bands, older handsets don't support those new bands, and a new handset or an updated handset would be required for that.
And so if someone is experiencing challenges on an older phone, would their best bet to reach out to you as the provider to get an updated SIM card?
Yes, that would be absolutely correct. And I think Brian touched on that earlier, you know, with things like the UMTS sunset as an example, there are active policies, active outreaches where we are doing handset upgrades, or there's discounted handset upgrades. So it depends on the scenario, but certainly reaching out to customer care. Customer care will be able to direct you towards the best solution for the situation you're in.
Great. And can I ask, sort of, when you call customer care, would they be able to tell you, oh, there was a cell tower in your neighborhood that was recently upgraded? Because I think that that's sometimes where it seems like things are slipping through the crack. One person calls and doesn't get an answer. One person hears that, you know, then shares it with the other person. But is there sort of a protocol in terms of the customer care?
That's actually a really great question. And recently we have upgraded our customer care services. So they do have insights into our network. If you do call our customer care, they will provide information as to not only what's going on in that local area, but also any potential upgrades that are going to.
Great. And I would imagine that it's also helpful to be armed with that question, right? If you're calling customer care, now you know that that could be an issue. You could ask them, hey, have there been any changes to cell towers? Or maybe it's not at my home, it's at my place of work, which is here. Could you give me some additional information? Because I think that sometimes it's just so frustrating because you have no idea what's going on, aside from the fact that suddenly your phone doesn't work where it used to. So.
Yeah, and I would just use caution too there, right? Because when you call, a rep doesn't necessarily know that it's a new tower, so something may not be flagged appropriately as an upgrade or there. They will be able to see sort of historically how the service is performing in the area, but they won't necessarily always fully know that, hey, this is a new tower. Because for them, it's just like a dot on the screen, right? They're going to see basically where the nearest cell tower is, but it doesn't flag specifically, at least on our software, you know, when that tower was added, anything like that. It's just showing as a tower.
Great. And you know, we do have some other very specific questions that we haven't asked, partly because we know that you won't have answers to them. So we may, what we'll try to do is actually compile those specific questions, send them to the appropriate company, and then see if there is an opportunity to provide any information. For instance, there was a question about where is the cell tower, you know, and whose tower is it going in on Morelli Lane? I don't expect you to be able to answer that question this evening, but perhaps if we forward this information, then we can get it back to folks afterwards about, you know, specific things for their neighborhoods and their community. Elise or anyone from the 5th District team have any additional questions that we feel like we haven't covered adequately yet? I'm trying to scan through the questions as quickly as I possibly can.
Linda, I was looking on Facebook and, you know, there was one comment. I know you listed a bunch of the geographic questions, but this one might be worth looking at just a little bit. Someone was asking, what are the plans for any of these providers to deliver broadband, cell, or high-speed internet to the Jenner Bridgehaven area? And I saw that there had also been in the Q&A some questions where there seemed to be a back and forth about whether there was actually a physical connection possible in Jenner or not. I don't know if anybody's informed about that issue or if anyone is able to speak to that, but I know Brian Hughes, you mentioned that you weren't able to connect to it, but then I think Mike Nichols online was saying he thought there was an ability. So I just didn't know if there might be a way to get some clarification or if anybody does have anything to share about the Jenner community, since that is one area that hasn't had good service traditionally.
So Leo, I can actually add, so with the free public Wi-Fi to kind of, you know, for some of the people in attendance, so the public Wi-Fi is a unique community resource in that it's outside. So we're not providing free internet into people's homes. We're not providing free internet, you know, inside. So this is a community resource that's available outside, which is great because you can make phone calls, you can look up at emergency sites, you can look at community sites, you can get, you know, people who can't afford Comcast, you know, if you know can come into town, leverage this network. Right. So that's kind of the first thing we got to kind of frame. The second thing is that in order for our public network to be deployed, their internet has to be available, not just fiber, right? You know, it's great that Jenner has fiber, but for example, Comcast, which is, you know, an incumbent ISP and provides a lot of service throughout the lower Russian River in West County, they don't have service at Jenner. So Comcast is not a service provider. We are still waiting. We're looking to talk to Sonic to see if they do, but my guess is they probably don't. AT&T, you know, is another option, but we need to buy, you know, we need to purchase internet, right? So Guerneville has 5 service addresses with Comcast. We have a business coax. It's 600 by 35. It's the best we can afford. And so we need that in Jenner. And so that just kind of, I want people to understand our limitations when we go into a community, is if we can't purchase internet, then we can't just sort of make it happen. We're not in a position to tap into dark fiber. We're not in a position to kind of roll our own fiber.
We also had a couple of questions noting the lack of presence here for Frontier and from Verizon, and just to let people know, we did ask, and we certainly appreciate those of you who have been able to come in and share your time and expertise with us tonight.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for attending. And I just wanted to offer the opportunity to our panelists, if there's anything that you would like to share that you feel like we didn't have an opportunity to cover, any requests that you would like to make of the community. I think we have a very active community who is very much interested in problem solving. I certainly look forward to continued conversations around how we can partner to better access state and federal funding. And of course, would always love updates as that confidential information becomes public, in terms of being able to service additional areas. Please do let us know, and we will make sure that we relay that out to the residents of Western Sonoma County. So open forum, if anyone wants to go ahead, just go ahead and unmute and jump on in. I'm looking at you, Damian. You look like you want to say something.
Yeah,
Besides
but
download watch duty, and do download watch duty.
Right, please. The two that I really would have comments for aren't here, so that makes it tough. I guess I can look to AT&T and T-Mobile and say we have a small population out in the coastal hills between Healdsburg and say Timber Cove. It's not a lot of people, but it is rough terrain, it is difficult, and it is hard to access. And there are a few places where we're able to get service. I can get Verizon service, for example, at the top of King Ridge Road. But we really could use more and better service through the more rugged terrain areas of Sonoma County. And I know how hard that is for these companies to accomplish. Verizon has long been the leader in Sonoma County in terms of providing access to rural residents. And we would love to see more competition out there. I think that would be fantastic, and really, would allow for some competition as well that is not present. I would love to be able to add to my litany of internet services that I can use in one place but not another, to be able to add cellular to that. And right now I can't do that with Verizon really, because we can only get it from one particular spot on King Ridge Road. But would be fantastic to see that happen. And there are places out there in this area that would be good hopping off points. And I don't think it would matter so much whether these services actually met 2022 criteria in terms of bandwidth and high speed. Even if it were a case where these companies could provide a minimum of service to allow for 911 calls, you'd be providing a benefit, and you'd be gaining a lot of friends out here. Instead of maybe purchasing or receiving Verizon's Femtocell, maybe we would get yours instead. Maybe we would be another group that would be willing to switch to a different provider. We've all kind of lived this way for a long time, and that's part of the reason why people like me do things like put together alternative communications services. And totally a fan on Brian's work to do the same. And we're lucky to see some additional capabilities, but if there are any ways to improve the situation from even the minimalist standpoint, really, given the situation that all of us out here have of living in a fire-prone area, we would really appreciate being able to even get a text message.
Thank you so much for that, Damian. And I'm wondering if Damian, you and Brian could just both reiterate, I know it's in, I think, the Q&A and the chat, but your contact information if folks want to get involved in some of these more grassroots efforts to expand communication services.
Sure. So my name is spelled with a Y, so Bryan. So you can reach me directly at brian@eqaccessca.com. And we do have a website up. We're still kind of new, so we're kind of getting all the bits and pieces kind of pulled together. But again, it's brian@eqaccessca.com.
Great. And Damian?
DBOUNE at gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for participating this evening. Really appreciate it and appreciate getting that information out. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you for organizing.
And thank you so much to our translator. We'll have a recording and we'll be able to post that after the fact, and hopefully some of you utilize that live translation. Thanks again to our interpreters. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that reminder. That reminds me that I also appreciate you, Leo, Elise, Tracy, and Jason. So thanks for the awesome 5th District team who pulls together the town halls and makes it happen. Oh, and Debbie. Very important.